Today I'm excited to be talking to you about an ancient grain that is seeing a rebirth all across the world, and in its time was known as the grain of the gods. Amaranth, as it is called, has been a staple in the Americas for thousands of years. First collected as wild food, and then domesticated multiple times beginning about 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. The plant itself produces a brightly colored flower, and the flower can contain up to 60,000 seeds. In fact, the seeds are the edible parts. And the seeds can be consumed whole, they can be toasted, or they can be milled into a flour to make something like a pancake or a tortilla. Amaranth itself is incredibly healthy, and we're going to take a look at this nutrition profile here. But suffice to say that amaranth combined with corn, beans, and chia was a real key part of the Mesoamerican Indian civilization diet. And in their language, in the Aztec language, the word for amaranth was huatzli. Some of the main health benefits you can see on the slide here, but the most notable one, in my opinion, is the protein profile. Up to 30% more protein in amaranth than in wheat flour, rice, or oats. It also contains a complete set of amino acids. So why was this food of the god so healthy, so integral to the diet? Why was it outlawed? Well, not only was it a food staple for the Aztecs, amaranth was also a divine plant. They valued it as such. They built statues of their deity out of amaranth. They would combine the amaranth with honey and they would bake it. They'd have these statues. They would worship the statues. They would break up the statues and distribute them for eating. Midwives would also use amaranth to create a bath for newborn babies, so it had some medicinal value as well. Well, when the Spanish arrived and they saw what an integral part of the life that amaranth was to the people, they knew they had to do something about it because their goal was to convert the people to Christianity. And they could see how far this grain had penetrated into the spiritual life. And so they ended up deeming it an ungodly pagan food. And from there they prohibited it, not just having it around, but they prohibited the growth of it, the consumption of it, and they burned the fields. So for the hundreds of years during the Spanish civilization, amaranth all but basically disappeared from the face of the earth, except in a couple areas like the highlands of Oaxaca and to the south among the Mayan people. Luckily for us, they didn't completely destroy the grain, and in a few remote areas, small amounts of it survived, and it was primarily used to make a traditional sweet dessert called alegría, which literally means in Spanish happiness or joy. And despite its near extinction, it survives today in contemporary cooking. You can find it in granola and pancakes and this dessert alegría. It's even found its way to Europe and India. In India, it's called the king's grain. And in the United States, it made its way back around the 1970s. So I hope you've enjoyed learning a bit about amaranth, and now I'm going to launch into my next video, which is a recipe. Hi, and welcome to my kitchen here in Tuxtla Gutierrez, Chiapas. I'm so excited to be sharing with you my own personalized recipe using amaranth, which we've already heard a lot about, the grain of the gods. And so this is my own dessert. It's kind of like a Mexican alegría, but my partner and I, Scotty and I, like to call them muddy buddies. So let's get dirty, let's get in the kitchen, and let's get making these delicious little, very healthy balls. Hi, and welcome to my countertop where I've got all the ingredients laid out here that we're going to need to make Muddy Buddies. They're very easy and they take about 5 minutes to mix and then another 30 minutes to an hour to sort of solidify in the freezer. So here goes. I like to start with about half a cup of some kind of nut butter. What works really well is peanut butter because it's kind of sticky and thick. But sometimes I also mix in a little bit of tahini, a couple tablespoons, for some different nut flavor. I start with that. Afterward, I mix in some of the seasonings. So I've got 2 packets of stevia here. These are 2 1-gram packets of stevia for sweetness. Some sea salt, about a pinch, maybe a half a teaspoon. I mix this in because I've had many chocolate bars that mix in the sweet and the sea salt flavor, and I think it's just to die for. And then I also like to add a pinch of cinnamon, again for extra tanginess. And for some crunchiness and also the health factor, cacao, we know pure cacao can be very healthy for us in moderation. I add about a tablespoon or 2 of pure cacao chunks. It looks like I'm running kind of low here, but I have just enough for one more batch. And then also for some extra crunchiness and some more color, I add coconut shreds. So this is just shredded coconut, maybe a tablespoon, tablespoon and a half. And then finally at the very end, I will add in my amaranth, which is kind of like this very puffy, light grain that we've heard about already. Very, very lightweight. And I add in anywhere from half a cup to a cup. It kind of just depends on how sticky my peanut butter is or how thick it is. And then from there I mix it all up and make them into balls and put them in the freezer. And that recipe usually makes about anywhere from 10 to a dozen balls about this size. So let's check it out now. Okay, so now I'm going ahead and getting dirty, getting my hands into, my spoon rather, into the peanut butter jar and scooping it all out. I've got almost a half cup in here. So you can see, half a cup is about 8 tablespoons. So I got my peanut butter. And now I think I'm gonna add just a little bit of tahini. And the tahini tends to be a little bit more liquid-like in texture. So I can't actually make this recipe purely from tahini because it would just be too smooth and the balls wouldn't stick together. So I just do a touch of tahini. And you see I've got my mixture in here. So I'm gonna mix this all up. Get it as smooth as I can. And that's looking pretty good. So now I'm gonna go ahead and add a pinch of my salt, sea salt. Maybe that was kind of a small pinch, I'll add a little more. Great, and I'm gonna wait to mix until I've added all of my dry ingredients. A little bit of cinnamon now, pinch of cinnamon. And we can see it's looking pretty colorful already with the cinnamon. And I am going to add my stevia packets. Sprinkle them in here. Other one. Okay, I've got all the sort of dry seasoning, so I'm gonna mix it all up. Not getting too dirty yet. You'll see why they're called Muddy Buddies later. Mix it all up here. Okay, it's looking pretty good. And now, for the crunchies, I'm gonna go ahead and add all of this chocolate. It's about a tablespoon, tablespoon and a half. Look at that, it's gonna be nice and crunchy. And my coconut. I'm gonna go ahead and take my measuring spoon here for the coconut. Let's put those shreds in. You can get a close-up look at those shreds. That's about half tablespoon. Let's get another full one in here. There we go. And a sprinkle more. Now this is starting to look like a really good swirl of ingredients here. I'm gonna mix it all up. Okay, we're getting close to the final part, which is where I'm gonna add the amaranth. Okay, that's looking nice and smooth, and it has a nice nutty aroma. So now here goes with the amaranth. And I don't have my measuring cup close by. I'm gonna use my tablespoon and go ahead and put in about 8 tablespoons. 3, 4, 5. You can kind of gauge it too once you start mixing. 6, 7, and 8. There it is. There's that mountain of amaranth, nice fluffy amaranth. Really healthy, high in protein. Mix that all up. Now this is looking to be almost exactly the right consistency, but I do think it's maybe gonna need a little bit more amaranth. It seems a little bit oily. That's one of my gauges. So I'm gonna go ahead and add maybe another tablespoon, tablespoon and a half. Just give it that extra crunchiness too, because the amaranth is obviously a little bit crunchy, kind of cereal. Great, now I think that's just perfect now. You see how it's gotten pretty thick and it looks like a cookie batter, except we don't have to bake it. No eggs in here, nothing that needs to be baked. So the next part of the process is you start making the balls. So I'll go ahead and I'll make one, and then we'll go ahead and pause the video so I can make more, not make you wait here. So that's one Muddy Buddy, and when that freezes, it'll be a little more solid and maybe even have a little bit of a crunch. Okay, so I hope that you can try this recipe at home. Hope you can find amaranth in the stores, all the other ingredients, and you can probably get clever with substituting if you need to. A really healthy dessert, a little bit like the Mexican alegría, which means happiness, but our own American version, Muddy Buddies. Thanks for listening. Enjoy.